Hey, how's it going? Coach Kyle here, and we're going to go through a functional movement screen. And these are just the movements and the criteria. If you don't pass any of these, then we can kind of go through the corrective movements later on. But the first one here is for the dorsiflexion. It's an ankle mobility, and it kind of tests your Achilles flexibility. So sitting in a chair, put your foot and ankles at about 90 degrees. Keep your feet in the exact same place on the ground and slide your hips forward so the front of your knees go past your toes. If you can't keep your heel on the ground, your Achilles is too tight. And a flexible Achilles helps the foot get behind the hips to allow for an effective toe off and optimizes how you store and release elastic energy. Next up, we have the dorsiflexion of the big toe. With the dorsiflexion of the big toe, again, sit in a chair, your feet and ankles at about 90 degrees, reach down and grab your big toe. Keep the ball of your foot flat, raise the big toe up and keep it straight until it's at about 30 degrees. If you can't get it to 30 degrees, or if the ball of your foot comes off the ground, your plantar fascia is too tight. Proper range here helps you roll through the ball of the foot at toe off. If tight, efficiency is compromised since your push off is cut short. Also, if you can't roll straight through here, through the forefoot of your foot, the forefoot of your foot will either spin inward or outward, and this can decrease support from the big toe and lead to injuries. Next up, we're looking at your hip extension. So this is a little awkward. You might need to think about this a little bit, but kneel down on the side or inside of a door jamb so your femur of the kneeling leg is vertical and the opposite tibia is vertical. You'll have a bit of space between your lower back and wall, like you can see there. And what you'll do is tilt your pelvis backwards so the hollow disappears. Imagine tilting a bowl of cereal so it spills behind you. If you feel a stretch in the front of your thigh, you're a little snug there. If there's no kind of pull or tightness, you're good. If there is, you've got some work to do. So as your speed increases, so does the need to generate more force from the hips. And if you lack hip extension, if you lack the ability to extend your leg and hip down and behind you later on in the running gait phase, you'll lose efficiency and the free elastic energy stored in those tendons that you cannot move with a full hip drive. Without the ability to extend the hip, your foot contracts further ahead of you and could increase braking and decrease economy. Limited hip extension compromises posture by forcing increased back arch, and such postural changes impair your core stability. Limited hip extension can also increase tension in the contralateral hamstring and can cause some hamstring strains. And now here, we're gonna lie on our back with one leg straight out in front of us and one leg up. Flex that leg so you can put your fingers behind the back of the thigh. Straighten your knee and kind of pull your leg up a little bit towards the ceiling. You should be able to get your leg up to about 70 degrees of hip flexion. For steeplechasers or hurdlers, you'll need about 100 degrees. It's okay to feel a mild stretch at the end of the range of motion. This hamstring tightness limits the range of motion of your pelvis on the hip, causing some compensation with the back roundness and loss of core stabilization, also contributing to hamstring strains. And here it might not look like I'm actually doing much, but we're looking at vertical compression test for postural alignment. So stand with your feet comfortable width apart, roughly shoulder width apart. Think of where your weight is. Is it more on your heels or distributed kind of more evenly over the entire footbed? If you have somebody with you, have a partner stand behind you with their hands on your shoulders. While you're relaxed and not overly tensing your core, have your partner press down firmly on your shoulders. Does your posture and spine buckle and move into a more arched position, or are you able to stand firm with weight evenly distributed over your entire foot? Many runners stand and walk and run in the back seat, slumped over position, and this decreases your ability to use your core strength, shifts your center of mass back, and causes you to land too far back versus your center of mass. This can accentuate an overstride. It makes it tough to activate your hip foot stabilizers and decreases economy. And now we're going to go into a squat. You don't have to use a bar. This is just an example of how to help correct the movement. But film yourself squatting from the side, just like this. And be mindful of, after the fact, does your tibia, your lower leg, remain fairly vertical like this? Or do your knees move forward ahead of your toes? If your knees move forward, you may be more likely to overstride. Hip backwards squatters, when your hip moves backwards, those people are better able to utilize their hip extension and contract closer to their body and run more effectively and efficiently. Now we're going into the bridge test. Lie on your back with your knees bent and your feet flat on the floor. Clasp your hands together and raise them up so you can't use your arms or shoulders to stabilize. Now, lift your hips off the ground with both feet on the ground. Kind of drive your heels into the ground. Which muscles are working? Hold this for 30 seconds. Then go into single leg bridges where you lift one leg off the ground. You'll see me do this momentarily. And then hold that for 30 seconds. And then lift the other leg off the ground and hold that for 30 seconds. Be mindful of which muscles are holding you up and stabilizing you. This helps identify your go-to muscles that move your hip. The glute max has two jobs: to move the hip behind you into extension and to stabilize. If your glutes are doing all the work when you raised your butt off the floor on both legs, you're on the right track. But what if you felt your pelvis shift and drop as you lowered one leg? If you said your lower back had some tightness, this may mean you are trying to arch the back and then move, and you're trying to correct with your posture a lack of strength. This lack of strength can result in postural breakdown and needs to be rewritten. Optimal running posture comes from extending the hips while keeping the spine stable. When raising one leg off the floor, you should be able to keep your pelvis fairly stable enough to balance a glass of red wine on your belly while on your mom's new white carpet. The glute max should be providing the effort to both stabilize and shift the pelvis up. If you notice one side or the other drops, your pelvis shifts, or an overactive or crampy hamstring, you may need to do some improvement with some hip extension exercises. Next, we're looking at your ability to isolate your big toe. Standing up like this, drive your big toe into the ground and plantar flex the foot while slightly elevating the lesser toes. So the plantar flex, you're basically standing on your toes. Don't try not to let your ankle roll in or out to compensate. Or more correctly, be mindful if your ankle rolls in or out to compensate. So again, drive the big toe into the ground, plantar flex the foot, and slightly elevate your lesser toes. If you bend the big toe joint, it's a sign that you're kind of dominating with the muscles up on the shin and you're not able to isolate the muscles inside the foot. This is important because the ability to isolate and coordinate the movements of the big toe provides control that you need from the foot during the stance phase. And about 85% of your foot control comes from your big toe. Now we're going to do some single leg squats. Stand in front of the camera and videotape yourself performing 6 single leg squats on each leg, and you can score your performance to identify some limiters. Everyone will start off with a high score of 6 out of 6 points, and you'll lose a point for each issue we find according to the next table or criteria. Smart and strong muscles maintain stability during these dynamic tests. Trunk shift signifies a compensation in lateral stability. If your trunk shifts, you might lose a point, or if your knee dives medially towards the second toe, you might lose a point. Running is basically a bunch of single leg squats with a flight phase between, and to run well, it's your responsibility to bring a stable body to the game. Just as you can't fire a cannon from a canoe, you can't push off from a bunch of unstable levers. Screening single leg balance and squat like this reveals deficits that can tell a lot about you as a runner. Problems here may show up immediately in your form or may mean you fatigue rapidly. When you look at your video, do you see someone who appears stable and solid or wobbly? The body should not rock or wobble excessively when running, so why should it when you're performing these tests and improving your movement skills? Trunk shifts are usually in response to profound weakness in the lower body. The arms and trunk should be still and quiet, so that stability is coming from the ankle and hip. If you see excessive wobbling in the foot, such as the inside ball of the foot and big toe repeatedly coming off the ground, you may have foot and ankle issues. If you see excessive leaning or shifting of the trunk, you're likely having hip issues, or you could be compensating for your foot. What's the difference? If your foot is stable and you are wobbling up top, it is likely hip stability deficits. And if both look unsteady, it is likely that both need tune-ups. The knee, the middle child, is stuck in the middle and does what it's told to do by the hip and the foot. Put more stability in a single leg stance. You can view this as a top-down or bottom-up approach, but either way, the body needs to work together. While good posture puts the pelvis into neutral for hip stabilization, it also moves the center of the body weight to the middle of the foot so that the big toe can do its job. We begin with good alignment and then work into more complex movement skills to generate higher forces like those during running. If we determine that there are some instability problems here, we can address those. The ultimate goal is to improve your stability, strength, and skill to the point where running is not stressful to the muscles that control the lateral and rotational planes.